There's an ongoing war of attrition between Nintendo and Sony in the world of video games. Now, we aren't entirely sure, but we think it's a war Nintendo are winning as they have bested Sony numerous times. Today, we're going to give you some reasons why we might think that. If this is your first time visiting us, then make sure you like this video, subscribe to TheGamer, and ring that bell to become a member of our notification squad so you never miss a video. Here are some times Nintendo outsmarted Sony. The matter of games. Perhaps the easiest way to get the upper hand in the video game business is the most obvious one. That's to simply make better games than your competitors. It doesn't really matter what else your rivals are doing. If the things people want to play are the things you and not them are making, then you've already got an advantage. When it comes to the Nintendo and Sony rivalry, this is an area where Nintendo has the upper hand. You can debate the PlayStation versus the N64, or the PS3 versus the Wii, or even the PS4 versus the Nintendo Switch as much as you like, but we reckon Nintendo will always own Sony when it comes to the actual software. That isn't to say there hasn't been some great games released on the PlayStation and its successors, because there have been. The thing is, the likes of the Tomb Raider and Grand Theft Auto haven't been made by Sony themselves, which means they've seen action on other platforms. Heck, there was even a GTA game, Chinatown Wars, for the Nintendo DS. While we really dig the likes of Crash Bandicoot, Ratchet and Clank, and those PS1 games which brought us into Sony's gaming world, they haven't had quite the lasting appeal we've seen with Nintendo's games. While Nintendo games have had some iconic classic third-party games, their consoles have never been focused on them, which we suppose is one of the advantages of having Mario games in your pocket. If though you want to explore the likes of the Mario franchise or the Legend of Zelda series, or even want to give the various incarnations of Metroid a blast, then you'll need to get hold of a Nintendo console. Otherwise, you won't be able to play them. It's really that simple. So this is one where Nintendo are the winners. Mobile trends. With its background as a company which made iconic portable devices such as, Walkman personal stereo, you'd think Sony would be a major player in the world of mobile games. You would, of course, be right. So, well done, you. The tech giant's Xperia range of cell phones has been a major success, a serious player in the Android market, and it's been a real string to the company's bow. However, if you're looking at what people are using their Sony phones for, well, it looks like Nintendo has managed to outsmart them yet again. When it comes to mobile app gaming, Nintendo set out its stall when it released Pokemon Go in 2016. The game used one of Nintendo's biggest franchises and made it mobile friendly, but in a way which, yet again, revolutionized the world of gaming. The idea was what you'd expect from Pokemon. You collect your creatures, train them, and do battle, but it did something different. Using a phone's GPS and camera, it allowed you to see the Pokemon as you walked around the streets of your town. Soon, people were playing it everywhere, with some gamers being warned not to trespass or fall down onto train tracks in their hunt for elusive creatures. The game smashed download records. People were out and about, discovering where they lived and making sure they caught them all. It was an absolute phenomenon, and it reached out to people who otherwise wouldn't have considered playing video games. Pretty much like the Wii had done for home consoles 10 years earlier. This was Nintendo using what it already had and mixing things up to come up with something which left its competitors behind. Sony may have had some of the hardware, and it was very good hardware, but when it came to Pokemon Go, Nintendo had all the software. Keeping the talent. Something which can make a company bigger and better than its competitors is how talented its staff are. Sony has had some really great designers working for and with the PlayStation series, with the likes of Jack Tretton, Shigeru Maruyama, John Kodera, and the father of PlayStation himself, Ken Kutaragi, all being absolute legends in the world of video games. However, while we salute their incredible achievements, we don't think they can match up to the absolute superstars Nintendo has working on their exclusive games. People like Shigeru Miyamoto, who gave us not only the Mario games and The Legend of Zelda, but even the underappreciated Star Fox series, go back a long way with Nintendo. They even have Shigesato Itoi of Earthbound fame and Pokemon's creator Satoshi Tajiri, who've come through the ranks at Nintendo and crucially stayed there. This has meant gamers know they're going to get games which have been designed by people who have given them some classics on similar systems. So there's a trust which isn't there with other companies. There's something about the company which means it's able to look after its best staff, who in turn deliver the goods time and time again. With their expertise and some of the world's most exciting young game makers, Nintendo has the upper hand when it comes to future gaming creativity. Oh yeah, and you know how we mentioned Ken Kutaragi a little bit earlier? He's someone who hasn't always worked for Sony. No, back in the late 1980s, Mr. Kutaragi was working for, yeah, you guessed it, Nintendo. While he was still employed by Sony, he was just doing a bit on the side, helping develop the Super Nintendo sound chip. Keep in mind, this was before Sony did gaming, and you can see how it was Nintendo's magic which kinda won the day and showed everyone who's boss. Patches never touch. One of the things where Nintendo has the edge over its rivals at Sony is pretty much something we could class as a legacy thing, but it's a sign of just how ingrained into video gaming Nintendo is. You see, back in the day, when a video game was released, what you got was what you'd get. The game didn't have any major flaws requiring fixing. Well, that was how it was meant to be, theoretically speaking. Anyway, this was because back in the 1980s and 1990s, we didn't really have the internet, at least not for console games, so games had to be right, ready, and proper. There were cases of games being delayed, which was frustrating, but when you got them, they were good to go. Nowadays, the reverse is often true. Certainly for PS4 games, having them come out on time, but then needing a patch to make sure they work okay is basically par for the course. In fact, we're not sure if there's ever been a PS4 game which hasn't needed players to download a fix onto it since the system came out in November 2013. It's certainly been an issue for a lot of games and gamers, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Compare this to Nintendo. Very few of its games seem to need patches and fixes. They're largely good to play right out of the box. Sure, they have updates now and then, but it's usually to add new features rather than fix a glitch or issue. This may seem like a little thing, but it's a mark of good game development, and it's something where Nintendo have been smart enough to have an upper hand over Sony. Even when there has been a mistake, such as when a flaw in a chip in the Nintendo Switch made it vulnerable to hackers, the patch is small, and it's fixed a lot quicker than with a PlayStation flaw. The flaw in the NVIDIA Tegra 1 looked like something which was there to stay, but an update made it go away without it being a fuss for gamers. We aren't 100% sure if something similar would have happened with the PlayStation. Nintendo PlayStation. There are a lot of things which, in our humble opinions, demonstrate perfectly how Nintendo manages to have the upper hand over Sony and have managed to basically outsmart them. Usually, these are demonstrations of just how innovative, smart, and dynamic Nintendo is. There's no shame in being bested by arguably the greatest video game company there's ever been in those areas. However, there's an example we are going to talk about now, and it's a bit of an unusual one. In fact, while it looked like Nintendo had outsmarted and bested Sony, there's also an argument that this provided the impetus for Sony to create the PlayStation and become a, forgive the pun, player in the world of video games. Okay, story time. Back in the early 90s, the Super Nintendo reigned supreme. When it came to 16-bit gaming, nothing came close. Well, maybe the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive if you were from the UK, but we think the SNES was the best of its era. There are some people who'd say it's the greatest console ever, but that's another matter. Anyway, while cartridge-based games was great, Nintendo wanted the slice of the CD-ROM pie. Enter Sony. Sony got together with Nintendo to make a CD-ROM add-on for the SNES. The idea was, as well as being able to play Super Nintendo cartridges, it would also be able to play CD-ROM games. It genuinely looked like the best of both worlds because it felt like this could give the SNES an edge, which would obliterate its rivals. However, despite it being announced in 1991, it never came out. That's because Nintendo didn't want to give away too many of its iconic characters and games to what was effectively a third-party developer and teamed up with Philips instead. In an odd sort of way, while Nintendo outsmarted and outdid Sony here, there's a sort of happy ending. The idea led to Sony believing it could do something in gaming, giving us the PlayStation. And that's all for today's video. We hope you enjoyed it. What's your favorite example of Nintendo outsmarting Sony? Have we left any other examples out? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to The Gamer.